They didn't say anything. Just a folded card and a $5 bill. No note, no call. Just the kind of silence that leaves a louder echo than words ever could. My name is Nora. I'm 36 years old. I live in a quiet part of town, in a modest apartment that smells like coffee and books. I work as a freelance editor, mostly for academic journals, which is a fancy way of saying I spend most days with red pens and quiet margins. And I like it that way. I haven't spoken to my parents in over 8 months now. It's strange how distance doesn't always begin with an argument. Sometimes it starts with a birthday card, or in my case, what was barely even that. It arrived on a Tuesday. I remember because I had just returned from a morning walk and saw the envelope wedged under my door. It had my name on it in my mother's handwriting, that same slightly slanted cursive she used on Christmas tags when we were kids. For a moment, I let myself believe, just for a flicker, that maybe it was a letter. Maybe something kind. Maybe, just maybe, an acknowledgement of everything I'd done to stay connected, to be seen. But when I opened it, all I found was a generic, pre-printed card, the kind you'd pick up near the checkout line at a pharmacy. No personal message, not even a love mom and dad. And tucked inside, a crisp $5 bill. $5. Not enough to buy dinner. Not enough to cover postage for a package. Just enough to say, we remembered. And more loudly, that's all you're worth. I stood there for a long time, staring at that thin slip of paper like it had weight, like it meant something, and in a way, it did. Because it confirmed what I'd spent years trying not to believe. This wasn't the first time they'd treated me like this, but it would be the last. You'd think a single moment like that would be shocking. But the truth is, when I saw the $5 bill, I wasn't surprised. Hurt? Yes. But surprised? No. Because this wasn't new. It was just the quietest echo of a pattern I'd lived with for as long as I could remember. Growing up, my younger sister, Amelia, was the golden child. She had this radiant smile, hair that always fell just the right way, and a voice that could charm a crowd. From school plays to birthday parties, she was always the center of attention, and everyone seemed fine with that, especially my parents. They never said it out loud. That's the thing with families like mine. Favoritism doesn't always come with a label. It shows up in smaller ways, like who got the bigger slice of cake, or who was reminded not to make a scene when she was upset. When I came home with an A, the response was usually, "That's great, Nora. Keep it up." When Amelia passed her classes, barely, it was cause for dinner reservations and a new pair of shoes. I wasn't unloved. I was appreciated. In a functional, practical kind of way. I was the one who could be trusted to babysit the neighbor's kids. The one who remembered to bring an umbrella. The one who quietly picked up the slack whenever something slipped through the cracks. I didn't throw tantrums. I didn't slam doors. I just did what needed to be done. Because that's what was expected. And over time, that expectation became a weight I carried. Invisible but heavy. When the dishwasher broke, it was I who looked up repair guides. When my dad's blood pressure medication needed refilling, I was the one to remind him. When money got tight, I quietly offered to skip my dance classes so Amelia wouldn't miss hers. No one asked, but they didn't have to. The message was always clear. Nora can handle it, and I did. Because part of me believed, maybe if I kept showing up, kept proving myself, they'd see it. They'd see me. Not just the helpful daughter or the reliable sister, but the whole person is beneath all that, holding it together. But the spotlight never shifted. Amelia was the one invited to sit up front at family gatherings, the one whose boyfriends were fussed over, whose opinions were asked at dinner. I, on the other hand, was often told to be patient or stop overreacting. The worst part was when I started to believe them. I remember my 17th birthday. I had saved up for months to buy my own secondhand laptop. The same day, Amelia was gifted a brand new tablet by our parents, just because. I smiled through it. Told myself it didn't matter. Told myself I was stronger for not needing help. But strength without recognition starts to feel like invisibility. Tried to bring it up once. I was 19. Home from college on winter break, sitting across from my mom at the kitchen table. I said something like, "Do you ever think you treat Amelia and me differently?" She didn't even look up from her mug, just sighed and said, "You're always so sensitive, Nora. You should be proud of how independent you are. Your sister just needs more support." And that was that. It wasn't a conversation. It was a shutdown. So I stopped trying. I went back to school, took extra shifts to pay rent, and never called home unless I had to. But every time Amelia needed help, proofreading her essays, borrowing money, getting advice she didn't follow, she'd reach out. And I always said yes, because even if they didn't see me the way I wanted them to, I still wanted to be good, to be needed. That hope, small and quiet, lived in me far longer than I care to admit. Even after college, when I got my first job and moved into a small apartment downtown, I still sent holiday cards. Still called to check in when Dad had his knee surgery. Still drove home to help clean the garage when Amelia was too busy. And every time I told myself, maybe this will be the moment. Maybe this is when they'll see I've always been here. But they never did. They'd thank me, sure, in passing. But the real warmth, emotional investment, the depth of love I longed for, that was saved for Amelia. She could do no wrong. Even when she dropped out of grad school, my parents hosted a weekend barbecue to cheer her up. When will I get promoted to managing editor? I got a thumbs up emoji in the family group chat. Eventually, I started pulling away, not out of resentment, but out of quiet self-preservation. I stopped expecting birthday calls. I stopped offering unsolicited help. I created space, hoping it might shift something, but all it did was make the silence louder. Until that Tuesday morning, that $5 bill wasn't just a birthday gesture. It was a verdict. It told me, without saying a word, exactly how much I meant to them. It started with a photo. A bright, golden hour kind of photo. The kind that makes everything feel warmer than it really is. I was in the middle of a late lunch break, half listening to an audiobook while sorting through manuscript edits, when the notification lit up on my phone. Amelia had posted on Instagram. I wasn't following her anymore, but a mutual friend had tagged me in the comments with a string of heart eye emojis and "so happy for you both." Curious, I tapped the post. There she was, my sister, standing in front of a white brick house with wraparound porch columns and a red door that looked freshly painted. Her fiancé, Justin, was beside her, holding a sold sign like it was a trophy. The caption read, "Still speechless. Can't believe Mom and Dad did this for us. Our forever home." The words blurred. I read them again, and then again. I couldn't move, couldn't blink. There was no text from Mom, no family group announcement, no quiet heads up, just an Instagram post like I was a stranger, like everyone else who stumbled across their curated version of the truth. They had bought Amelia and Justin a house, not helped with a down payment, not co-signed, gifted, a house. The confusion came first, then disbelief, then that slow, crushing weight in the chest. The kind that makes you want to sit down even if you're already sitting. My phone slipped from my hand and landed on the couch beside me. I just stared at the wall, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the floor, like the day itself was folding in on me. They hadn't mentioned it, not once, not even when I called a week ago to ask how Dad's doctor visit had gone. Not when Mom had ended the conversation with her usual, "Talk soon, sweetheart." And then, as if the universe needed to drive its point home, the doorbell rang. It was the mail carrier, a small envelope in his hand. No return address, but the handwriting on the front was unmistakable. My mother's cursive. Slanted slightly to the right, always a little too tidy for someone as emotionally messy as she often was. I opened it with the corner of my thumbnail. Inside, a generic birthday card with glittery flowers. No handwriting, just the default message from the card maker. Tucked inside, a single crisp $5 bill. That was it, a $5 bill. The same day I found out they handed my sister a house, they handed me $5. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just sat there. For a long time. There's something surreal about moments like that. When the final piece of proof you've tried not to see arrives, simple, undeniable. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was a declaration. They didn't even pretend to hide it. Not anymore. I picked up the phone and called my mom, not out of impulse. I just wanted to hear her voice say it. I needed to know if maybe, somehow, I had misunderstood. She picked up on the third ring, her voice light and distracted. Nora. Hi, honey. Everything okay? I skipped the pleasantries. I just saw Amelia's post. You gave her a house? A pause, a rustle of paper in the background. I imagined her sorting through bills or folding laundry, always multitasking when it came to me. Well, yes, she said finally. It just made sense. You know how hard things have been for her and Justin with the wedding planning and all. And you're doing fine on your own, aren't you? Doing fine on my own. That line, it, landed heavier than she probably meant it to. Or maybe she did mean it that way. I honestly don't know anymore. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from saying something I couldn't take back. My hands were cold. My voice, oddly steady. You didn't think I might want to know? More silence. Then a soft, awkward chuckle. Nora, don't be like that. We just thought you'd be happy for them. Happy. The word felt sharp and hollow in my mouth. I hung up soon after that. Politely. No drama. Just enough civility to keep it from turning into something louder. Then I sat back down, card in one hand, $5 bill in the other. I stared at it for a while. And then I placed it gently on the kitchen counter. It stayed there for 2 full days. I didn't move it. I didn't spend it. I just let it sit, like a tiny monument to everything unsaid between me and the people who raised me. I went about my life in quiet autopilot, made coffee, answered emails, fed my cat. But inside, something had shifted, something permanent. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even the money. It was the message. You don't matter enough to even be included. And the worst part? I had seen this coming for years. I just kept hoping I was wrong. That was the moment I stopped hoping. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream or rip up the card or call Amelia to demand an explanation. I didn't do any of the things I might have done 10 years ago. Instead, I opened my laptop, and for the first time in a very long time, I started writing something for myself, not for a client, not for a journal, not for a paycheck, just a simple document titled, The $5 Birthday, because if they didn't see me, maybe someone else would. The past doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just shows up quietly, in the way a memory slips between your thoughts, uninvited, but perfectly timed. After I wrote the first draft of The $5 Birthday, I sat by the window for a long while, letting the screen go dim. And like a soft tide rolling in, I started to remember. I was 16 when I won a regional academic scholarship. It was a big deal. There were newspaper clippings, a small award ceremony at school, and even a guidance counselor who pulled me aside and said, "This is going to change your future." At dinner that night, I placed the certificate on the table like it was proof. I was doing something right. Mom glanced at it once, nodded, and said, "Don't let this get to your head. Stay focused." That was it. 2 days later, Amelia got a C in math, and my parents took her to the mall to help her feel better. She came home with new shoes and frozen yogurt and a playlist she made me listen to on repeat. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was different, stronger, independent, but I felt it, that quiet flicker of something being off. It happened again the following year. I was working part-time at the campus bookstore during my first semester in college. Between classes and my shifts, I barely had time to breathe, let alone rest. But I needed the money for books, rent, and food. Meanwhile, Amelia got a brand new car for her senior year of high school. So she won't have to walk in the cold, Dad said. They never asked if I needed anything. I just made do. That was the pattern. My needs were background noise. Her wants were a priority. And yet I kept showing up. When I finally moved out, a small one-bedroom in a shared building near my university, I did it quietly. Packed my things over the course of a few weekends and left one morning with everything I owned in the backseat of a borrowed car. No party, no photos. Just a quick hug from my mom and a distracted, "Text me when you get there." 2 weeks later, Amelia hosted a sleepover with her friends, and they ordered pizza and cake. My old room, now hers, was filled with balloons. Even then, I didn't feel anger. Not really. Just a kind of dull ache. The kind that makes you want to curl inward, like a note folded so many times it disappears. But the memory that stays with me the most, the one I try not to revisit too often, is from when I was about 9. It was my birthday. I remember the weather, because I had hoped for sunshine, but it drizzled all day. There was no party, but Mom gave me a wrapped gift and said, "We kept it simple this year, sweetie." Inside was a wool sweater, navy blue, a little scratchy, tag still marked 40% off. That same afternoon, Amelia, who was 6 at the time, got a surprise gift for being so sweet all week, a gold bracelet with a tiny heart charm. I remember holding my sweater in my lap, watching her twirl in the kitchen, holding her wrist up to the light. I said nothing. That was my superpower back then. Silence. I thought it made me good. Easy. To love. I believed, truly believed, that if I kept being helpful, low maintenance, self-reliant, they'd see me. Not just the girl who didn't need things, but the girl who still wanted to be chosen. Looking back, I see now that I wasn't trying to earn their love. I was trying to prove I was worthy of it, that by not needing anything, I'd finally be enough. It shaped everything. I became efficient, responsible, controlled. I mastered the art of stepping aside with a smile, of making space for others while shrinking my own needs to fit the margins, and, in many ways, it worked. I built a life on my own terms. I learned how to survive without leaning, without asking, without needing. But there was a cost. I became guarded, quiet in all the wrong ways. I didn't let people in easily. I deflected compliments, mistrusted kindness, and braced myself for disappointment even when things were going well. And beneath all of that, a small, steady hope that one day my parents would really see me, that they'd call me just to say they were proud, that I'd come home for dinner and they'd pull me aside with tearful eyes and say, "We didn't realize. But we do now." That hope lived in me far longer than it should have, and that's what made the $5 card so brutal. It didn't just disappoint me. It ended the story I had been telling myself for decades, the one where love would eventually find its way to me if only I waited long enough. I didn't sleep much the night after the Instagram post. The glow from the screen seemed to burn long after I turned it off, like it had marked something inside me that couldn't be undone. But instead of spiraling, I felt still. Not peaceful, not yet, but clear. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't want to win their approval or even argue my side. I just wanted to put it all down, plainly, honestly, in a way that couldn't be interrupted or minimized. So I opened my laptop again, and I began to write, not as a rant, not as revenge, but as a reflection. I titled it, The $5 Birthday Gift. It began with the envelope, the silence inside it, the way it didn't just represent neglect, but something colder, a kind of erasure. Then I wrote about the patterns, the years of quiet dismissal, the way love was rationed like a privilege I hadn't earned. I wove in memories, moments, small truths, all the things I had buried under politeness and self-restraint. I didn't name names, I didn't accuse or condemn. I just told the story as it happened, as I lived it. By the time I finished, it was nearly 4 a.m. I sat in the dark for a few minutes before hitting publish on my personal blog, a site I had barely used in years, mostly tucked away with a handful of old essays and photos from college. I wasn't expecting anyone to read it, but by noon the next day, the link had been shared over 100 times. By the end of the week, it was everywhere. There was something about the title, maybe, or the rawness, or the fact that so many people had felt it. That quiet kind of pain that doesn't come with slamming doors, but with being slowly edged out of your own story. I started receiving emails, messages from people I didn't know, and some I hadn't spoken to in years. One said, "I didn't know how to explain my childhood until I read this." Another, "I was the strong one too. Thank you for making me feel seen." A podcast reached out, then two more. A digital magazine published an excerpt. An old college professor messaged me saying she had assigned it to her psychology class, and somewhere amid all that noise, a text arrived from my mother. It was short. "Why would you do this to us?" No greeting, no acknowledgement, no curiosity. Just that, as if I had set fire to something they held dear. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "I didn't do anything to you. I told the truth." She didn't respond. A few days later, Amelia sent a string of voice notes. I didn't play them. I just read the transcript my phone generated. Most of it was defensive. "You've always been dramatic. Why are you airing private family matters? I thought you were stronger than this." But there was one line that stuck out. No one else ever had a problem with how things were. And that was exactly it. No one else had to. I didn't respond to Amelia either. I just sat with her words for a while, then deleted the message thread. There was no need for a fight. No shouting, no big dramatic showdown. That's not how families like mine operate anyway. The damage is quieter than that, and so is the healing. Instead, I drew a boundary. I didn't go home for Thanksgiving. I sent a polite message, wishing them well. I didn't make excuses, and I didn't feel guilty. Christmas came and went. I spent it curled up on my sofa, hot cocoa in hand, the city outside glowing with quiet lights. I watched old films, called a few friends, and read poetry late into the night, and I felt okay. Lonely in moments, yes, but not hollow, not aching, just whole, in a way I hadn't felt in years. 3 months later, I used my savings and bought a small place of my own. Nothing fancy. A 2-bedroom condo on the 3rd floor of an older building with creaky wooden floors and sunlight that spilled across the living room at exactly 9:14 a.m. When I moved in, I brought almost nothing with me. Just books, my grandmother's tea set, a desk I refinished myself, and a framed photo from when I was 5. The last time I remembered feeling completely unfiltered joy. On my first morning, there, I sat on the floor, cross-legged in my pajamas, drinking lukewarm coffee and listening to the wind outside. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. People still reach out about the blog. It's been shared on platforms I didn't even know existed. I've been invited to speak on panels about emotional boundaries, generational roles, and the weight of being the strong one. I accept some, decline others. I've learned the power of choosing what I say yes to, and when I speak, I don't talk about villains or blame. I talk about awareness, about how love without fairness feels more like an obligation, about how sometimes the quietest person in the family holds the deepest ache. Most of all, I talk about reclaiming your own story, not to get back at anyone, but to find your footing again, to look at that $5 bill and say, this doesn't define me. It's been a little over a year since I published the $5 birthday gift. Life looks very different now. I wake up in my own space, small, sunlit, and entirely mine. There's a peace that comes from choosing your environment, from arranging furniture not to impress anyone, but simply to make mornings easier, cozier. My windows don't overlook much. A crooked alley, the tops of rustling trees, a bakery, 2 buildings down, but it feels expansive in ways my childhood home never did. I no longer ask myself if they'll call, if they'll finally apologize, if this holiday or that milestone will be the one where things shift. I've stopped waiting. Instead, I've turned that quiet ache into something meaningful. About 6 months ago, I started a small online forum, private, invite-only at first, for people like me. People who grew up being the resilient one, the emotional fixer, the silent witness to favoritism, and the invisible wounds. We called it the overlooked ones. It began with just 7 women. Then it became 70. Now, there are hundreds. We share stories, not to dwell or spiral, but to acknowledge, to name what was unnamed. And somehow, in that naming, we begin to release it. Some of them still speak to their families. Some don't. There's no right way to heal. Only forward. In one of our first Zoom sessions, someone said, "I've spent so much of my life trying to be easy to love. I forgot to love myself." That stayed with me. I've written more since then. Essays, short reflections, even poetry. Not for publication, just because there's something sacred in putting words to what once felt unspeakable. And somewhere in that process, I realized I don't need closure from them. I needed clarity with myself. That clarity came not in a single grand moment, but in quiet rituals. Sunday mornings where I sleep in without guilt. Grocery trips where I buy the brand of tea I like, not the one I was raised to think was good. Enough. Walking away from relationships that feel conditional, saying no without explaining why, and in one final gesture, one that felt strangely ceremonial, I pulled out the $5 bill. I had kept it tucked in the back of a drawer all this time, not out of spite, just uncertainty, like I wasn't ready to decide what it meant. But now I was. I took a simple black frame, the kind you'd use for a certificate. I placed the bill inside, centered. Below it, I typed and printed a small line in soft gray font. This was the price of my awakening. It hangs on the wall just above my desk now. Sometimes when I sit down to write, I glance at it. Not with bitterness, but with something closer to gratitude. Because that moment, painful as it was, gave me something my family never could. The push to choose myself. Amelia still posts happy, curated snapshots of her new house, her baby shower, and family dinners with my parents around the table. I don't engage. I don't block either. I just release. She got the house, the spotlight, the gold bracelet. But I got this quiet life. This deep understanding of what it means to be okay alone, to choose peace over permission, to stop performing for people who only see you when you're useful, and I wouldn't trade that. Not anymore. The other day, someone asked me if I missed them, and honestly, yes. Sometimes. There are moments. Birthdays, memories triggered by a scent, old family recipes I still cook the way my grandmother taught me. where I feel the echo of what could have been. But I don't ache for it anymore. I let it rise, breathe through it, and let it go. Because I know now, I didn't walk away to hurt anyone. I walked away because I finally understood I didn't have to keep proving my worth to people determined not to see it. And there's power in that kind of freedom. They handed me $5, and I turned it into